how do you even begin to talk right now? How?
I really don't know. This is going to be a tough episode.
And I'm sure there's people tuning in thinking that we're recording this after the Sabres lost to New Jersey 7-2, where they only had 12 shots on net. But we're not, actually. This is 24 hours later, and the Buffalo Bills just lost in overtime to the Philadelphia Eagles.
This is the second time this season something happens like this. The Broncos game, we lost, and then, the Sabres lost the next day, right? Or was it the day before? I mean, oh my God, it's depressing. It's a depressing life to be a Buffalo sports fan. It is torturous.
I don't even know how to follow up. I guess, it would have been weird if they had won the game and we had to record this. Our spirits would have been slightly uplifted, but I think it's only appropriate that the temperature is already turned up.
It's just so frustrating. I mean, this year was seriously supposed to be such a good year for both of these teams. And don't get me wrong, they can both still turn around. Like, if the Sabres, if they turn around, like, they can get hot. Like, I have no doubt they did it last year. But, I mean, right now it's not looking good. And same thing with the Bills. If we somehow squeak into the playoffs, we can still go on a run. But it's not looking good for both of them. Like, it's just, oh my God, it hurts. Like, such high hopes this year just to be absolutely destroyed by both of our teams. And debatably both of our head coaches. So,
all of that and more will be discussed. Welcome back to another episode of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah.
I'm JP.
And in this week's installment, we will be talking to you about the latest week in Sabres action with maybe a little bit of the Bills' misery mixed in there. No Christian this week. He is currently out of town. So all those jabs that he was throwing at JP while he was out, I guess it can be thrown back in his face, to say the least.
Yeah, you're not kicking me out of the pod that easily.
Let's just get right into it. A very up and down sort of week with the Sabres. The overtime loss in Washington was ripped right out of their hands. The Sabres blow a 3-2 lead late in regulation and lose with 4 seconds to go in overtime. They head back home for a Black Friday matchup against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Looking like much of the same, down 2-0. Come back in the third period with a resounding 3-goal comeback in front of a sold-out crowd. And they carry that momentum into Saturday night's game against New Jersey and probably put up one of the worst displays I've seen by a Sabres team. I would say in quite some time, but it really hasn't been, probably since the Dallas game last March. All of that accounts for another 1-1 in 1 week for this team.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we still did get 3 points. It's not like we dropped 3 games. But I would just say the way that we lost these games is just what hurts the most. It's like if we would have lost to the Devils and it was a close game, like it would have been fine. They've been on a rough skid, but they're still a very talented team. They, of course, got Heischer back. The game
they were humiliated the night before. Yeah. They lost to Columbus in regulation. They scored 1 goal on them.
You knew they were going to be fired up, but it's just the way we lost the game. And same thing with Washington. Like, haven't they been? Weren't they? On
they were playing.
Or they were playing good.
Washington was playing well, but they had that game.
Yep.
They had that game. Zach Benson scores arguably the best first NHL goal you'll ever see.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably right up there with Jordan Eberle's with the Oilers.
And with his basically future of the Sabres maybe being on the line that night. That's how he stuck around. I think he would have stuck either way, in my personal opinion, but that cemented that he should be with the Sabres.
And they finally get some production out of somebody like Victor Olofsson. 2 assists in that game. Dylan Cousins scored a goal in that game finally. And with 1 minute to go, it just falls apart. And I think this is going to be the start of a conversation about Don Granato in that last minute, Zemgus Girgensons and Kyle Okposo were both on the ice, and Zemgus Girgensons was late to cover Tom Wilson, and it ends up in the back of their net. That's the start of kind of it was the start of a very downswing week for Granato. And the question marks have already been present much throughout this start, but you're seeing more and more these questions about how he's adjusting to playoff expectations, trying to win in different ways, and just a wider scope look at how he's trying to change the way this team plays. Because there is a change in how this team has been playing. We all see it. And I think that the end of that game speaks to one of his probably worst aspects of his coaching to start this season. And it's been in-game decisions, a lineup decision, like putting Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons out there with a minute to go.
But you could even say, I mean, if you're thinking about what happened in the Washington game, we basically parked the bus towards the end of the game, which has honestly been an issue with this team going even back to last year. So, I mean, last year we were able to close out some games and we were able to outscore teams. And by the way, last year we hit a ton of empty net goals, and we've had like multiple chances to do that this year and just haven't been able to. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get maybe putting the vets out who are supposed to be good at defense, but they just haven't proved that they should be out there within the last 2 minutes of this game. I mean, they've just lost a step, and it's tough. But I mean, that's also not ignore the fact that this probably should have been saved. I mean, not that it was a great shot by Tom Wilson, but this goes into a larger issue with Levi that we are going to get into. But just an ugly way to blow that game and to go get into OT. And we still had a chance going into OT. And, well, we know what happened there.
JP and I did watch that game together, and JP does know that I was blowing off some steam after that game ended.
Yes, that was, he was not happy.
It was a very heated moment. It was one of those games that just set something off. It was just an ugly loss. They parked the bus once again, like JP said. They said like halfway through the third, Washington had like one shot on goal, and Buffalo had none. And it came back to bite them. They didn't seal the deal, and they lose. They lose a point, and B, they hand two to somebody who is probably going to be in the wild card race with them. Just an ugly finish to a game that cannot end this way against that opponent.
And you just knew that when Cousins turned over that puck that they were going to go down and score. Like right away, I stood up and I was like, yep, this game is over. Like you just had that feeling. And then like we tweeted about it and how it was a dumb play by Cousins. I mean, 4 seconds left, the game ended. It's just, God, it's torture.
All right. Let's jump over to the one positive thing that has happened in Buffalo sports this week. The Sabres come home for one game, matched up against Pittsburgh Penguins, national game. It's Black Friday. All of our lovely Buffalonians who are maybe elsewhere are back in town for Thanksgiving. It's a packed barn, and through 2 periods, it is looking like much of the same. Pittsburgh gets both of their goals off of
turnovers.
Very bad turnovers by the defenseman. Matthias Samuelsson on the first Pittsburgh goal, and Rasmus Dahlin, probably with his worst play of the season, gives it right to the slot, and Pittsburgh goes up 2-0. The Sabres get booed off the ice going into second intermission, And Kyle Okposo reportedly said something at intermission, and whatever he said sparked something in the team. They put up their best third period of the season.
Their best period of the season.
Probably best period of the season. They finally they look like the high-flying Sabres that they should be. They're rolling three lines. Tuck and Skinner show up to play, and they get depth scoring too. Kyle Okposo buries a goal, and they finish off probably the best win of the season with a monstrous third period.
Definitely. And even the first two periods were really not that bad. Like, you could argue that it was a pretty even game. We just had two bad turnovers. But it was just the fact that we weren't really generating any offense. But the third period, I mean, that's the Sabres that we know and love, at least, compared to last year. And that's more of what we need to see. I mean, that was a gutsy win at the end. That was huge.
The thought process after that is, okay, here we go. Finally, they unlocked whatever was holding them back, whether that was whether that was themselves or the coach or whatever. It finally looked like progress. They may have just saved their season.
It looked like they got their swagger back.
And they head into New Jersey, and like we said, probably one of the worst performances that this group has put up. Honestly, it might be their worst game under Adams and Granato. That Dallas game, believe it or not, was 4-2 at one point, and obviously the wheels just fell off the wagon there. But from the get-go, Alex Holtz kicks off the scoring 2 minutes into the game, and from that point on, there was just no fight, no pushback, nothing from the Sabres.
We finished the game with 12 shots. We finished the first period with 3, the second period with another 3, and then we had 6 in the third.
Hey, they doubled their output in the third period.
They did. That is impressive, but that just speaks to so many levels on what's wrong with this team this year. But the fact that in a blowout where, you kind of think, at least, if you want to think of it from an analytical standpoint, score effects, this is when you expect the other team to kind of generate some more offense, get some garbage time goals, make the game look like maybe it should be closer on an analytic standpoint. And we finished the game with 12 shots. I mean, it was bad. Like, I personally didn't watch the third. I wasn't able to. So I don't know how we looked in the third, but the first two periods was insanely frustrating to watch.
And it should be mentioned that there were a few factors at play. Firstly, that Pittsburgh game, Alex Tuck, Jeff Skinner, Casey Middlestat all played around 25 minutes. You couple that with the fact that the Sabres had to travel, and they were going up against a New Jersey team that was very not happy with their performance.
And got their captain back.
And the Sabres call up 2 rookies who are about to play their first games in the NHL. This was probably never going to be a win. However, it should not have gone down like that. Yeah. That should never happen.
Unacceptable.
That is one of the worst performances. That shot output is one of the worst probably totals in this franchise's history in a single game, which is crazy. Insane that happened. Insane. Truly, it's just a microcosm of the season as a whole. The offense there's no juice to it. There's no spark. There's nothing there right now. It's painfully average. Let me ask you a question. What is the Sabres' identity right now?
I honestly don't think they have an identity. I think they want it to be a defensive identity, but they haven't even been good at that.
And isn't that terrifying?
That's been their focus.
Wouldn't that be terrifying if they wanted their identity to be a defensive team?
Yep.
I don't think they want that 100%, but there has been a clear shift in what this team wants to be, and yet there's no defining aspect of them. They just don't have one right now. They are painfully average offensively. They are painfully average defensively, and they are painfully average in goal. And two of those things, I guess, in defense and goaltending, hey, those are improvements from last season. But that offense has withered away to just a terrifying degree.
Mediocre. It's with all the talent we have, and don't get me wrong, of course we're missing Tage Thompson, of course we're missing Jack Quinn, but this offense was looking like that even with Tage. Tage getting hurt didn't really change much about the identity of this team because it's been a whole season issue.
And I think this is where the conversation turns to Don Granato. I think it turns to him. When last season ended, there had to be a conversation between Don Granato and Kevin Adams into what they thought the next step was for this team. And I am sure that they heard the noise from the fan base that this team stinks defensively, they stink in net, something needs to be done there. Their best players, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, they are essentially anchors defensively, and if that had all been better, then this team would be in a playoff spot. And while that's true, I think I had a moment of clarity maybe where I think they went into the direction that this team, that the overall system needed a defensive overhaul. And in reality, I think they just needed individual improvement. And I think they made the wrong step, and I think you're seeing the effects of that right now. If you think about it, the fact that Tage Thompson was doing as well defensively as he was, as funny as it was, as much as we were all laughing about it, isn't that weird that he was doing that over one off season? Over one off season, he suddenly became this super responsible player. And same thing with Dylan Cousins. It was the same thing. It still is the same thing with him. He's not. How many end-to-end rushes have you seen Cousins start? How many?
Not many.
How many breakouts has he kickstarted himself? These are not the same players from last year, and it's obviously not the same team. It's funny. I was having a conversation with someone while watching the New Jersey game, and they were, we're going back and forth, and we're asking each other, he's asking, what's wrong with this team, and I'm saying it's the offense. It's just not the same as it was last year. Everybody's point totals are down. And they said, well, Jeff Skinner's still producing. And you know what? He is. Because he's like the one player that hasn't changed the way he's playing whatsoever. He's still Jeff Skinner. His defensive metrics still stink. He's still cheating the zone whenever he wants. Sometimes it's laughably bad. I think that Heischer goal, he totally gave up on the 3-on-1. He didn't cover his guy. Whatever. That's the give and take you have with a guy like that. Because guess what? He will be one of your best players. He will be one of your best offensive creators. And you don't mess with that. Because the last time you did mess with that, you stumbled on to one of the worst. You stumbled onto the worst coach in the franchise's history. And one of the worst eras in this team's history, year over year.
Jeff Skinner's play has changed a little, though. He has learned how to play the bumper, and he has 2 goals on the power play. He finally listened to us.
And isn't that annoying? You know how badly I want to come on here and commend this team for improving the power play finally? 2 goals. Jeff Skinner has 2 goals from the bumper in the last 2 games. Like, they're actually doing it now. Their power plays went 2 for 2 against New Jersey. Do you know how badly I want to talk about that instead of questioning the overall direction of this team? I hate that I have to talk about this. But it's true. Everybody looks mitigated. Dylan Cousins looks like a completely different player than last year. Completely different.
I guess First of all, you put it a really good way in that we didn't need to overhaul our system and that we just needed individual improvement because we were the youngest team in the league. You don't need to change a system when your young players are going to get better defense over time because they're developing players.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was something else I was thinking about. How that the Sabres went from like 28th, 29th, maybe even 30th. It depends on the model in expected goals against per 60 last season. Obviously, bottom of the barrel. You want improvement from that. Ideally, you want league average, but that's a huge jump for a team that, I mean, if you're going by the New Jersey starting lineup, they're 24.6 years old on average. That team is not going to be good defensively. It's just not. They've made this jump to, depending on the model, Evolving Wild, I think, has them at 16th, and I think Jay Fresh has them at around 19th. So they're hovering around league average. And, that is a big jump. And in a way it's encouraging because at least they have the ability to do better. But at the sacrifice of being one of the most high-flying teams in hockey, is it worth it? I don't think so. When you take a step back and you look at last season, they scored the third most goals in hockey. They were one of the best offenses in the league. And they finished with 90 points with 890 goaltending, arguably the worst goaltending in the league, and some of the worst defense in the league. And they're tinkering. They chose to tinker with the offense, and not directly. It's not like they're telling these guys, don't do what you did last year. But there is a clear shift into how they're telling them to play the game. They're not cheating the zone at all. They can't get transition going. They can't get the puck from their end to the other end in a timely manner. It all started the moment that they signed Eric Johnson, and he had his opening press conference, and one of the first things he said was talking about his time with the Avalanche and how that team took a step when guys like McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog, that they all took steps defensively. And I remember being excited at the prospect of that. Oh, man, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, if they were able to take steps defensively, even just get to average to below average, that would be so big for this team. But it goes back to, I think, what they needed was individual improvement, and what they went for was system improvement. If you want to look at Colorado, okay, Nathan McKinnon and Gabe Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen, none of them are like Selke, especially somebody like Nathan McKinnon. None of them are Selke candidates. They're still themselves. They're still average to below average defensively. They didn't change that much. They just improved enough. Jared Bednar he never tried to mess with the cohesiveness of the offensive unit. It never happened. So that talking point has been mentioned numerous times by Eric Johnson, by Kevin Adams. Remember the Tampa game earlier this season? They win that game 3-2 in overtime. What's Dylan Cousins talking about post-game? We know we need to win these defensive battles. We know the defense needs to come first. It has been drilled into their heads. It is so obvious that their first step needs to be back, and they shouldn't even think about cheating.
Don't get me wrong, Jonah's wearing a Bills shirt, and we just watched a Bills game, but this is reminding me so much of how McDermott and co. drilled into Josh's head not to run the ball the first half of the season, and look where our offense went. And now look at this. We drilled into our offensive-minded players on the Sabres to prioritize defense and maybe, at the expense of some of our offense. And it it hasn't worked out. The thing that frustrates me most is like it's basically what you've been saying, but you can get better at defense without sacrificing your offense. You just be more responsible in the zone. Like if we think about the Devils game, a ton of their goals were just on bad coverages. Like a guy was wide open in the slot, or it was a 3-on-2, and we had 3 guys on 2 of their guys. Like all you have to do is get either some better back checking or better coverage in our zone, and that shouldn't affect the rest of your game. But somehow it has changed the entire landscape of our game. The Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 point last year, and were one of the most fun teams in hockey to watch. Everybody in the NHL recognized that. We were one of the most exciting teams to watch. We were one of the most teams with the biggest chance of a big jump next year, and we completely changed our game. We've gotten rid of everything that was fun about our game, and that's the most frustrating part. It's not like, it's not like last season where we were scoring a ton of goals, but we were losing some games because our defense just sucked. This year, we're not scoring any goals, so it's not even fun to watch them lose. At least like last year, we'd get in some shootouts and be like, if we had better goaltending, we'd be fine. But this year, it's, we can't score goals to even get in the chance of a shootout. It's just, man, it is just frustrating to watch. It's, we don't have the players to turn into Lou Lamoriello's Islanders. I'll tell you that. And it kind of seems like that's what we want to do. We want to score goals and then play some good defense. Instead, we should just be piling it on. Keep scoring goals so they can't catch up.
I was so happy at the end of the Pittsburgh game for multiple reasons. Obviously, it was a big comeback, and the place was sold out, and it was you've only gotten one other crowd this season that's been sold out. But I was also happy because that's the type of game that will bring people back into the building. And there is no secret that this team has had issues bringing people back into the building for multiple reasons, okay? Obviously, tickets, super expensive now. Alex Tuck even kind of threw some shade at it on the postgame for TNT. And frankly, their home record has been bad. But you treat your fans to a third period comeback like that with a high-flying offense, guess what? You know what people are talking about? Oh, man, I got to get to another Sabres game soon.
That was
I gotta come back.
Huge for the fans. That was one of my first thoughts. And even so, then they're looking at our Sabres schedule. And, like Jonah just said, they're looking, I got to get to another Sabres game. But they're like, they play tomorrow. Like, I'm going to turn on the game and watch. Like, I just had a lot of fun watching the Sabres on Black Friday. I'm going to watch them again. And what do? They put up an absolute stinker.
And this isn't to say that I think Don Granato should influence his coaching decisions based on if it's going to bring attendance into the arena. But this is a team that has shown to play well with a more packed building. And you're trying to reestablish a fan base here. And to take away essentially their identity or to try and change it into something it's not, I think it's proven to be a misstep. It's a misstep. It's okay. Okay, I understand what Granato wanted to do. Like I said, we all wanted the same. We wanted improved defense. We wanted better goaltending. We wanted that. And we knew offensive regression to an extent was going to come.
It was inevitable.
Tage Thompson had 94 points. Alex Tuck, Jeff Skinner both had career years. Darlene had a career year. Cousins had a career year. Guys like Peterka and Quinn had really solid rookie seasons. You would expect them to build off of that, but even then, look at Quinn. He's hurt to start the season. There's some built-in regression right there.
But at the same time, Peterka's having a great year. Middlestat is having another great year. You expect some regression out of some guys, but you expect other guys to keep getting better. I mean, Benson's been pretty good for us. We still have some guys that have done better than they did last year, but an overall offensive regression was inevitable.
It's just evident that whatever they had planned for this season, whatever they wanted this team to be, it's not working. They have an identity crisis. And honestly, I do wonder what the players think. Kyle Okposo has come out multiple times this season and said, We need to be ourselves. We need to just
Mm-hmm.
stop worrying about how the other team's playing. We just need to be ourselves. And I do wonder, like, it can't be easy for guys that have come up, whether they've been in the NHL, the AHL, whatever developmental league they've been in, where they're all playing these high-flying offenses, scoring points, and they come onto this team, and it's a huge shift in how the coach wants them to play.
I was going to say that earlier, that most of these players have gotten to where they are today because of their offensive output, and now the coach wants them to change that. They want them to be more defensive centered, not just focus on their strengths.
I think that it's important to not freak out too much. That, like I said, I think Granato just took the wrong steps. That he looked at last year, was probably just as frustrated as everybody else for some losses. How many games did they go up early and lose late because they had no defensive structure, their goaltending was terrible, and they lost out on the playoffs because they had many of those games where they just couldn't seal the deal or they couldn't get the saves. And I'm sure it was so frustrating. I just think they took the wrong path. And it's okay because there's still time. They're still in this race somehow.
There's still
somehow.
3/4 of the season.
Somehow they're still like a 500 team.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about this like they're 5-15-2 or something. This team is still in the race. There is still time to turn this around. And I think we've neglected to mention, because it can be a talking point, the injuries. Tage Thompson's out. Jack Quinn's been out. Jordan Greenway went out after the Washington game. They lost Zemgus Girgensons during the Pittsburgh game. They just lost Samuelson during the New Jersey game. Like, there's been a lot of man games lost, but the play style has been evident that there has been a change. If they're losing these games, if they're still losing these games like 6-3, 6-4, and it's just, they're just being outclassed because they don't have the talent. Like I said, I wouldn't have expected last night to be a win against the Devils. There were too many factors, and frankly, like that roster, I can't believe they're having the start they are. Because you look at that roster from top to bottom, it's a contender. You don't win those games easily. But the way they lost, the fact the offense looks so mitigated, the fact that they've been prioritizing defense, not just system-wise, but lineup-wise, because 11-7 has persisted until this New Jersey game. They're taking missteps themselves. It's not just the injuries. It's not. It's not something they can hide behind, and I'm not saying they've attempted to hide behind it, but they need to show more. There needs to be a change on the fly here. You can't continue this path. You're a fourth of the way into the season. This team is on pace for 78 points, a 12-point drop-off from last year. That can't happen.
That was our over and under on points last year.
If this season ends in that fashion, there is going to be question marks. Huge question marks for this staff. And I know they won't, like, Don Granato is not in danger of being fired. I'll say right now, I think this season would have to finish the way it's going, and they would have to get off to a slow start next season. Because, look, Granato's earned a lot of goodwill. Think of all the careers he's revived or revitalized or developed. You think of Jeff Skinner and Alex Tuck, who he's taken to next levels. He turned Tage Thompson into a near franchise center. He turned Dahlin into a franchise defenseman. There have been so many instances where he has proven his chops as a legitimate NHL coach. He can get a team from point A to point B. But point B has not proven to be a winning team yet, unfortunately. Or I should say, a playoff team. And I think that's unfair because if Don Granato gets a few more saves out of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen last year, they're in the playoffs. But this is the first season where it's clear. There's playoff expectations. The team is expected to be more. And he's just kind of staying the course. He's not making rash lineup decisions. And I'm not saying he needs to be throwing out crazy combinations and whatnot, but he's been slow to change. They finally got away from 11-7, and I think he recognized that. And they finally called up the kids. But like I said, they were slow to get to that point, and he's still hesitant to make the necessary changes. Erik Johnson is still in this lineup nightly. Henry Jokiharju was a healthy scratch against New Jersey.
Yeah,
a healthy scratch.
I disagree with that entirely. We have not been Yoki fans in the past, but genuinely he's played pretty good this year. And debatably, he's probably been our fourth best defenseman this year with only Donleen, Power, even though some people hate that, and Ryan Johnson above him. He's debatably been pretty good. The only thing that me and Jonah talked about that they probably hold against him is he doesn't really play any special teams. Ryan Johnson really doesn't either, but Ryan Johnson has been playing really good. So you could hold that against him, but the fact that Yoki gets scratched over Erik Johnson and even Clifton, and I like Clifton more than most.
He had a rough game against New Jersey.
Really
he had a rough game.
Yeah. But who is he paired with?
He's always paired with Erik Johnson. Like, why? Like, they are so persistent about that pair. And here's another thing. I was on Twitter, and I was reading a really good back and forth between Kevin, or at NTRider825 on Twitter, and Lance Lazowski. And they were bringing up some really good points about the Sabres offense, their lineup decisions and whatnot. And this, I think it was Kevin that made the point. He made a really good point. If you think about it, like, they added a third pair in Connor Clifton and Erik Johnson, whose strong suits do not lie in puck movement. And you couple that with the fact that Mattias Samuelsson hasn't been great to start this year. You have three defensemen in your lineup that are struggling to get the puck to the forwards. That it's just not their strong suit. It's not what they're there to do. And that's half the defensive lineup.
It's just like Bush last year.
Essentially. And that's part of the reason why their transition game is suffering. And like it or not, the one guy, and I shouldn't say the one guy, but one of the guys who is really good at getting the puck from the defenseman to the forwards, it's Jacob Bryson. It is. It's probably the one thing he does really well. He's a good puck-moving defenseman. And that's not a, they need to play Bryson. That is not an indictment of Don Granato that he hasn't been. But all I'm saying is you take Jacob Bryson and Henry Jokiharju out of the lineup, especially against a team in the New Jersey Devils who, you know, we saw. Like, look at the last game we played against them. A back and forth offensive showdown, counterattack. That's the style that both these teams play. You need to be quick in getting that puck out of your zone after they have an offensive chance to your team so that they can counterattack. It's two rush teams going at each other. And when your defensive lineup contains Samuelsson, Johnson, and Clifton, it's not going to be nearly as strong. And Jacob Bryson and Henry Jokiharju, that's what they do. They're not great in the defensive end. They're not even great in the offensive end. But they're here to move that puck up the ice to the forwards so they can get their counterattack going, so they can start generating offense off the rush. And I think they missed that.
Man, I hate hearing that because I'm not the biggest fan of Bryson, but you're not wrong. I mean, in a game against the Devils where it's going to be a lot of offense, and instead Donnie prioritizes defense basically with putting those three out there. So it's, I don't know. And it's also been tough that, I mean, you mentioned a little, Samuelsson, he has not been good this year. And we've already said on this pod that Samuelsson and Dahlin really hasn't worked at all this year. But they refuse to break up that pair too. So, you got a lot of issues on the back end. And it's not even just Eric Johnson and Connor Clifton. So they need to make the right decisions, and they're not. They have changed up the offensive line so much, and they've just refused to change up the defensive pairings, which that blows my mind. And quite frankly, if they're going to put Eric Johnson in the lineup, I don't know who the hell he should play with because he just shouldn't be in the lineup. But it's him and Clifton is just not working.
Okay, I think we've given Donnie enough. I think we've given Donnie enough criticism for one episode. Unfortunately, the way the season's going, it's probably not the last time. So let's try to change up the conversation here. Let's go to Devon Levi. So we are 20 games into the season. He started 9 games, and he came into relief against the Devils for his 10th. And through these games, I think it was 10 games. I might be wrong. But through those games, he has an .876 save percentage and a negative 2.59 goal save above expected.
He's bottom 20th in the league in that.
Yeah, I think by Money Puck's model, they had him bottom 20. It hasn't been the start that we thought it would be. It's becoming clear that, okay, he's 21 years old. There's a reason that there was so much discourse about whether or not this was going to work, because unless your name is Carter Hart or Carey Price, it hasn't worked. And it's very tough if you're not put behind a very good defensive team. You know, the Sabres are league average, which is not the worst conditions for a guy to play in, but they're not a shutdown unit that's going to make it easier for a young netminder like Levi. He has struggled immensely, and frankly, he's probably lost his team games. That Washington game, I need a save on one of the last 2 goals.
Mm-hmm.
He was slow to react on the game-tying goal against Tom Wilson, and on Dylan Strome's game winner, he was cheating to get ready for the pass across on the 2-on-1, and he got beat clean. The instances of him stealing games just haven't occurred as often as you would like. And that's not to say he hasn't stolen games. He's played great in some games. The Minnesota game comes to mind. And those games are evident that he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. He just needs time. He's 21 years old. How many goalies in the NHL have not spent seasons, plural, in an AHL or a backup role? You won't find it. You won't find it.
Look at UPL. He took his time. Right now, he has a .914 save percentage. Whether that's sustainable or not, he's got a .914. But I think the thing that stuck out to me most is that you could kind of tell in his play that his confidence is not there. He's looking behind him sometimes. He's letting some regular shots get through him, get under his arm. Like that happened a few times last night. And it's kind of reminiscent of how UPL was last year when he lost his confidence towards the end of the year. You could just tell the confidence isn't there. And that's the thing you don't want to see with Levi, who's supposed to be this really confident player, and that's when he plays his best. And I think they do have to make a decision. And we in this podcast, we said that Levi should basically be our 1A, 1B going into this year. And I still stick by that, by the way, because last year he proved that he could have, at the very least, everything he showed us last year proved that he could have, or at least showed that he had the chance to do it, because he played so well coming right out of a college season, and no one expected him to be at least this bad to start the season.
And I think the difference between last year and this year is clear. It's when the guy has confidence.
Yep.
Dude came in with just the biggest load of confidence last season. When he played the Rangers, in the post-game interview, he was asking for one-timers when the Rangers were trying to win the game.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I think about the Florida game when he stops Matt Tkachuk with a minute to go, and he's like 20 feet out of his net. It's baller stuff like that he does when his game is on. And
it's just not right now.
There's a few factors at play here. Because, yes, he's not right now. I just don't think he's ready. Not fully ready. B, the 3-goalie rotation is messing up everybody's ability to get into a groove. Now, Comrie's been out for some time, and Levi's bad games have come in this stretch. But even then, like, you look at the starts that the Sabres have designated for each goalie, nobody's starting more than 2 consecutive games. Even that's rare. It's been UPL Levi, and Comrie comes back against Winnipeg. Then they go back to UPL. Then they go back to Comrie, and then Levi was back. Like, it's all over the place. And it's not just that Levi's play has been underwhelming. They have 2 goalies who are doing fine. Eric Comrie had a rough night against New Jersey, and obviously the way that the Winnipeg game-winning goal went in, there's been gaffes. But Levi's been the worst goalie, and they have 3 goalies on the roster. If his name wasn't Devon Levi, and I hate to use this argument, but if his name wasn't Devon Levi, he probably would have been sent to the AHL weeks ago. And I get it. They have all the confidence in the world in Levi. They still do. I still think he's the franchise goalie for the Sabres. It's just not right now. And it's okay, because I think you have 2 NHL caliber goalies. But it's time to make the move. Get him into the AHL. Get him into a team like the Amerks. I mean, hey, right now, they're pretty short-handed. He's going to get a lot of reps, and he just needs to figure out the pro game at a lower level first, and there's nothing preventing you from bringing him back up at any point this season.
I also don't think, with how his confidence is right now, you don't want this to keep snowballing into where this might actually affect his development path. Like, you don't want this to be an issue going forward. And I kind of get maybe why they haven't sent him down is that might, it might hurt his confidence even more. Oh, he was supposed to be the guy, and now he's being sent down the AHL. But I think he needs to get back to, dominating some competition to get his confidence back up. I mean, it's crazy, at least in my opinion, the 2 parallels of UPL and Levi. Last year, Levi was so confident, playing so well. UPL clearly no confidence in this season. It's a complete opposite right now. UPL is playing with a ton of confidence. He's been our best goalie, where Levi's been our worst goalie, and he has no confidence. It's all confidence when it comes to goalies, and he has none, so they need to make a decision for the team's behalf, first of all, and for his own behalf.
Do we want to maybe end on a slightly more optimistic note?
Please. Yes, something positive.
Let's talk about the kids.
Yes.
Let's talk about the youth movement. So we mentioned earlier that the Sabres starting lineup against the New Jersey Devils was 24.6, which is just insane. It's, I think, a full year younger than the next team above them. I think the team above them was Columbus, and they were like 25.4, something like that. So, first of all, we mentioned it earlier, Zach Benson, who, after scoring one of the best goals you'll see, and probably the most, I mean, you want to talk about confidence? How about an 18-year-old going through the legs for his first NHL goal?
Insane.
That's confidence. Zach Benson is sticking around. For how long, we don't know, but enough that Kevin Adams was confident enough to burn the extra year on Benson's ELC.
And he deserves it. I mean, he has played well pretty much all season, minus, when he was injured a little. But he has been one of our better forwards. And maybe his point production isn't exactly showing that, but he makes plays every single game where you're like, yeah, this kid, he's not just your regular 18-year-old who's playing in the NHL. He's making advanced plays. He's a great forechecker. He's making some big passes. I mean, I think it was the Pittsburgh game alone where he set up 2 players in front of the net. And I mean, he has the confidence too. So he 100% deserves it. I can maybe see them sending him to World Juniors depending on how this season keeps going, but he deserves it. And the people that are saying that, it's not right, he's too young, we don't need this team to get any younger. I mean, you're just denying how good Benson has played and how much he does deserve it. You want to show your players that if you play good, you're going to earn more playing time. You're going to be able to earn your spot on this team. And if you were to send him down after being one of our top 6 forwards right now, it'd be a real shame.
That is the first instance of them rewarding the youth for legitimately playing good. And second of all, after a lot of begging, after the Pittsburgh win, and Zemgus Girgensons goes down with an injury, he gets placed on IR, and Jordan Greenway is confirmed to not be playing for the team until after the Rangers game. Kevin Adams finally calls up Yuri Kulik and Isaac Rozan from the Rochester Americans.
And I love that he did it with them together because their development path, at least the past 2 years, they've been basically attached to each other. And they've both, neither one of them deserves it more than the other. Rozan has arguably had the better year this year. It's just that Kulik obviously is a better goal scorer.
And they both make their NHL debuts together. Not the best game to do so, but finally the Sabres are caving in. These are the decisions you want the team to make. You need to look for a spark. Your spark is not going to be found with Brandon Biro or Lucas Rusek, and it's not going to be found by playing Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons more minutes. It starts with this. And frankly, it's time for those two. It's time for Isaac Rozan. I'll say that. This guy, he's in his D+3 year. When else is he going to get the chance? You look at next year's roster. Next year's roster, it's going to have Zach Benson on it, probably. It's probably going to have Kulik on it. You're going to have Savoy battling for a roster spot. And then if you bring back everybody that's already on a contract, plus re-sign a Jordan Greenway, you're already at 11 or 12 forwards. And Rozan isn't going to have the opportunity to move up in the lineup. This is his opportunity. And I hope it's an extended look.
Mm-hmm.
And for Kulik, it was deserved as well. You need goals. And this is the guy that's going to give it to you. There's nothing, I don't want to say there's nothing, and I'm not saying it would hurt, but there's not much else for them to learn at the AHL level. They're both point per game through 20 or so games this season. Rozan has an acumen for being very responsible defensively, at least more so than Kulik. And Kulik, I don't know if it'll ever really be a big part of his game. And it's improved this season. So there's not much else they needed to learn. Now it's just doing that at a higher level. So with Zemgus Girgensons being out for a little bit, and
Tage and Quinn and now Greenway, it's time.
They're handing over the keys. If they're going to make it through this stretch without two of their best players and a few depth pieces, it's now on them. And I wouldn't want it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
You want it on them. Figure out who's going to be here. Figure out who. I mean, it makes roster building for next year easy too.
I don't care if we got younger. I saw some people, complaining about that, and then, once the Devils game got out of hand, people are saying, "Oh, did Kulik and Rozan really help? Like, we just brought up more kids." They deserve it. They are gonna make this team better. And what other replacements would you really want? Would you want some older guys? Would you want like Brett Murray to come up or Brandon Biro? Like, no. And use your top prospects, give them a chance, and give them the reins. Give them a chance to help turn this team around.
It will be interesting to see how they react to the returns of Quinn and Tage, primarily, and Greenway and Girgensons, because let's say they all do reasonably well. Like, Benson keeps doing his thing. Rozan and Kulik are producing at a pretty solid level. I would say, akin to how Peterka produced last season. And you have Tage and Quinn come back. Those two are going to come back at probably similar times. And you're going to have some roster decisions to make. And if those two are producing and Gergensons and Okposo, they're kind of just trotting along, doing their, continuing a mediocre start for the both of them. Although I do have to say, Kyle Okposo's been playing some pretty good hockey these last few games.
The last few games he's genuinely been better.
And I think when talking about Okposo, I don't know if they will ever scratch him.
No.
I don't know.
They won't.
You look at that Pittsburgh game, his voice means something in that locker room. He was the one that turned that game around. He ended up scoring a goal, although Erik Karlsson did put it in the back of the net for him. He's the one that's driving the mentorship of this team. And given what they just did, turning themselves into a year younger, they do need a little bit of guidance. But I look at a guy like Gergensons, and Gergensons is the example of a guy where he's an assistant captain. He's been here and played an important role for a while. But are they going to be willing to make the tough decision? Especially if they're still in the playoff race when Tage and Quinn come back, and if Roseanne and Kulik were producing.
I would hope they do, but I really have almost no confidence. I mean, they scratched Krebs for a few times, and we could talk about him a little. Jost, I mean, he's been fine this season, but they really haven't scratched him much recently. Olsen's been playing better recently, so I can't complain about him, but I really don't have any confidence that they will make a decision like that. And that's also why they're not scratching Erik Johnson, because he's the Kyle Okposo of the defensive group, basically. He doesn't have a letter on his jersey, but it doesn't mean he can't be a leader. So, I don't know. And I want to bring up Krebs because I thought he had a really good game against the Penguins. Honestly, if he was on a different line, if he didn't have Okposo and Gergensons out there, he might have had 1 or 2 assists. He made some really good plays.
This team has to find a way to stay in this race. And I hope and pray that, Granato begins to open up the system, that he lets the guys play more loose, and that he tells them, hey, this hasn't been working for us. I hope that he has, in a perfect world, he has this huge meeting with the team and says, hey, this isn't working. We need to shift something here on the fly, and there needs to be a balance, but we want to go back to what we were and what we were best at. That's what the Sabres were best at last year. They were the high-flying team. They were the team that could kill you with their offense within an instant. They would score goals in bunches. That experience of becoming a more competent two-way team, I think it has to be built naturally. It has to be a progression. It has to be an evolution. You can ask Erik Johnson how that went. Okay, these Stanley Cup winners were not built in a year. You're not going to have the 2012 LA Kings where your first run with a core, you're just going to go to the Cup final as an 8 seed. Colorado in 2017-18, they make it as the 8 seed, and they get their cup of tea in the playoffs, but they get taken out by the President's Trophy winning Nashville Predators. The next year, they're in a similar situation. They're taking on the first seed in the West, the Calgary Flames. They take them out in 6. So there's improvement there. And then they go to the second round and they lose to the San Jose Sharks in 7 games. Progress. But the next season, they lose in the second round, Game 7 again. The year after that, they lose in round 2, Game 6. I'm fairly certain they lose to Vegas. So for 3 years, there's no progress there. But then, year 5, they break through. They storm through the playoffs. They sweep the Predators, beat St. Louis in 6. They sweep the Connor McDavid Edmonton Oilers, and they take down the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games, who were on the verge of a dynasty. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I'm not equating team defense to Stanley Cup. I'm not equating that to playoff success, but it's an analogy that I look to more so to describe that they just have to learn it themselves, and they have to do it. They have to make these steps themselves. I don't think the system changes that they've attempted to make have been beneficial, and depending how you look at it, it's kind of a Kruger light situation. I hate to say it, but mitigating the offense to fall into these defensive, dare I say, principles, it's resulted in some stagnant hockey to begin the season.
And I still do think they will be fine. I have confidence that they will turn it around. It's looking dollar and dollar by each game. But what I can tell you almost pretty confidently, it might not be tomorrow night against one of the best teams in the league right now. It's going to be tough to,
a trap team, no less.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to turn your game around there. So, I don't have high expectations for tomorrow night. But who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us.
God, this city could use a win right now. It's been a tough 48 hours. Very tough.
Second time we're saying this year, by the way. In like a month also.
Yeah.
Actually in 3 weeks, because Denver was 2 weeks ago?
Oh my God. Why? Why us? What did we do to deserve this? Genuinely, what did we do?
I don't know, but we need to get to the bottom of it.
Sports are cruel. Sports are cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so looking ahead here, the Sabres, as JP said, they kick off the week against the New York Rangers tomorrow night in MSG. On Thursday, they get a little bit of a layoff. They travel to St. Louis. And on Saturday, they head to Carolina once again. And Sunday night, they will be home against Nashville. So looking at this, maybe we'll talk to you after the Nashville game. Maybe not. Maybe we'll wait till that Monday night. But that's how this week is going to look. 4 games in 7 days. I'm not even going to say let's get something going because it just hasn't worked to this point. Just win.
Mm-hmm.
Please win. Please win. Those last 3 games are very winnable.
Why does it feel like every back-to-back we have to travel, though? Like, the Devils didn't travel.
Well, they won't have to this weekend. They're in Carolina, and then they're here. Well, I guess not.
That's why I said
okay,
that.
I guess.
Because we're in Carolina,
I see what you
then
mean.
we come home.
I see what you mean.
Like, the Devils just played a back-to-back, but
I
they're
mean,
home for both of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure it evens out over the whole year.
Yeah.
I get it, but
I mean,
it's 3 times this year where we've had to travel on back-to-backs.
yeah, we really haven't had back-to-back home games. Yeah, you are right with that. Okay. So, I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the Sabre Roundtable. If you guys want to follow us on Twitter, follow us at the Sabre Report. If you want updates for the pod, follow us at Sabre Report Pod. Follow us on Instagram at the Sabre Report. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok. And if you want to follow myself, my personal Twitter, you can follow me at Jonah Aaron's 11. If you want to follow JP, I believe it's at JP Aaron's 4.
I don't know, something like that.
Okay.
I think it's at JP Aaron's.
Okay. I think he tweeted for the first time ever.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I don't really tweet much, but today's Bills game took it out of me, and I...
He stomached enough to tweet out a word and 3 letters.
Yep, fire McDermott. I'm on the train.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been here for a while.
Yeah, tune into the BST podcast because we will surely get into that this week.
There's a good plug. All right, so until next time,